I'm so excited. I can't even put into words because it's been coming for a long time. I know.
We've been trying for a while now, haven't we, mate? We finally got there in the end, though.
Yeah. I mean, it's been what, almost a year or two since I first reached out. I saw your podcast
That's
on
it.
Joe Rogan. I've
Yeah, yeah,
seen almost most of them, and I was like, this guy's interesting. This is the one I want to reach out to.
yeah, quality, quality. Yeah,
But
no, I knew we'd make it happen eventually, but it took a while.
that's your slogan though. Make it happen, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So where are you right now? Are you in Wales or
I'm in Amsterdam. Yeah, I'm
Amsterdam?
here
Right.
for 2 months. And then I head back to the UK, back to
Awesome.
London. Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. Are you
So,
excited for that? Where's you've been around the world a lot, so what's your favorite place to be at?
oh, don't know, don't know. I'm kind of figuring it out still. City wise, so me and my girlfriend are basing ourselves here. I guess it will be 2, 3 months altogether. And then London, we've kind of already lived in Manchester. After a couple of years, we'd like to try Dubai. And
Right.
then after that, maybe after 6 months or 12 months of Dubai, maybe Bali.
Yeah.
And so I kind of want to travel around and be based in sort of different cities now. So when I'm out on my extreme sort of adventures, expeditions, I'm doing that. But then when I come back, I would like there to be a base in a cool city, a good place that I like, and where the sun shines. Not like the UK, it's
Yeah.
not the best for an outdoory in the UK. It is for the training, good training ground, but the weather's not great. What
True.
about you? Where are you calling from?
Well, I'm calling from Champaign, Illinois, in the
Okay.
United States of America. It's out of the middle of nowhere, just where I'm studying in university. But I know you mentioned adventures, and I think that gives us a good stepping point into what we'll be talking about today. So, a little
Yeah.
introduction for me. My name is Jay Malavia. A little bit about me is I'd best describe myself as an avid learner. I love learning about cultures, people, and I believe every person has a story to share. So, that as well.
No.
And with that, we have here with us Ash Dykes, 3 times world's record holder. Absolute mad. I don't think words can describe what you've done. So I'll let you have a go at it. And if you can tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what you've done so far.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So as you said, 3-time world first record holder. Um, I've taken on plenty of different sort of adventures in the past, but the records of first person to walk the entire length of Mongolia, completely solo and unsupported, 1,500 miles, took 78 days to complete.
Wow.
And I was only 22, 23. And in Madagascar was the first person ever to walk the entire length of Madagascar, south to north, via its interior, summiting the 8 highest mountains along the way, sort of hunting, gathering, facing a number of different challenges from being held up at gunpoint to catch a malaria, being stuck in the jungle, sort of machete in hand, hacking through. Um, Many difficulties, but I completed that. And then the most recent one, well, the most recent record, should I say, was the Yangtze River across
Right.
China, which was 4,000 miles, 352 days. That was a big, ambitious one. Um, and yeah, we completed that, but it was only 2 months ago. I came back from what was potentially the biggest step of my adventuring career, which
Right.
was following the Great Wall of China, but with a big time production team, creating a 6-part 1 hour TV show, which is going to air globally. So,
We're
can't
excited
wait.
for it. We're excited
Yeah.
for your documentary. A little bit about when you're going through and saying, hey, I want to go through an adventure, Yangtze, Madagascar, Mongolia. What's the story behind it? We can start with Mongolia, the first one, if you like. But what was the story behind
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, sure. I guess, what ultimately led me to want to travel in the first place was gain knowledge and experience about the world, but also about myself. I was in high school. I went on to college, do an outdoor education course. And, after 2 years, the rest of the students were looking to either join the military or university. And it was in that college course that I thought, I'm learning far more through hands-on practical experience than I am being sat in the classroom. That's just my way of learning. That's how I learn. So I wanted to to come up with an idea where I could continue learning in that style with that method. And so I thought to myself, it would be great to travel. Traveling came to mind. I wasn't sure what career I wanted, what job I wanted, what my future was. But I kind of gathered that if I leave at a young age and travel the world, meet people from all over the planet, from lots of different countries, but also mix and mingle with the locals, sort of absorbing their culture, their traditions, and seeing a world full of opportunities and so many different options than I had back in my small town, Old Colwyn in the north of Wales, living on the coast where, no one really knows of. And so that was my thinking. I developed in so many new ways. And I realized that the world's a big place. There's loads of options. But right now, my careers advisor was only giving me no more than 10 different options, and I knew that there was more than that. So I worked multiple different jobs at the age of 16, 17, 18, fish and chip shop. I was lifeguarded, saving up as many pennies as I possibly
Right,
could, because traveling it was pretty expensive. And, I don't come from a financial background. So,
right,
my mother and dad didn't chuck me any cash. It was just years of hard work all day, every day. And then eventually, after a number of years, age 19, I set off, me and my friend. We were traveling around. This was great. We had a wonderful time, but we found we were very much on the tourist route, which isn't a
right,
bad as such, because sort of meet people from all over the world and you're still
right,
taking on experiences. But when you think of traveling, you kind of want your own unique experiences. You know what I mean?
right. And
You want
can you
your own those.
of course, and can you tell the audience exactly what you did when you were 19 years old? Because when I heard this, I was absolutely just surprised because that's my age and I could never imagine doing such a thing.
Ah, nice. Yeah, me and my friend again. Our first stop was China. We traveled China for a number of weeks. We ventured down to Southeast Asia. We were pretty miserable on the Mekong riverbank, sort of moaning away, saying how much money we had spent. And I suggested to my friend that we haven't even left the tourist room, gathering the same photos and experiences and stories as the rest of the travelers. What can we do to get on this winning track? And I suggested to him, why don't we just get a bicycle and we start cycling? Um, and he kind of laughed at that idea. The thought of getting cheap bicycles, which we already knew they would be ridiculous looking bicycles because we were on
Yeah,
a huge budget. And that's it. We wanted to cycle the entire length of Cambodia and Vietnam. The bikes cost us no more than $10. We didn't have a pump for the tires. We didn't have no puncture repair kit. We had
wow.
a non-waterproof tent. We didn't have no electronics apart from the camera that we took. No mat, no nothing, no planning. And literally off we
So
went.
yeah, so for the viewers, I kind of want to put this in perspective. At 19 years old, Ash bought a $10 bicycle with no backup plan and cycled the length of Cambodia and Vietnam. That's absolutely amazing. So when you were on that journey, what was your backup plan or like what did you do for food or shelter? I know you said you had a tent with you, but in terms of like cities and camping laws, like how did that work?
Well, it's funny because Vietnam is very populated. There's lots of different villages, towns, communities along the way. And so we were never really stuck. We could always find a place to rest up for the night. And to be honest, it was so cheap, especially the towns and communities that we came across. I remember cycling upon sort of like this, it's kind of like a truck driver rest point where you've
Right.
just got tin roofing, uh, shelter underneath, and you've got maybe 15 to 20 hammocks. And
Yeah,
you pay, I think it came to the equivalent of 20 cents for
20
the
cents.
and you just, put your rucksack there by your side and you just in the hammock and you drift off to
Not a
sleep.
bad deal.
Not a bad deal. And so we were coming across, things like that. And that also meant that food and water weren't really a problem either, because where there's a road, there's people, where there's people,
Right.
that's water. But it was pretty reckless, to be honest. The bikes weren't up to that challenge. It was
Yeah.
over 700 miles.
Wow.
We were chased by dogs. We were hit by mopeds. We were dodged by lorries. We would cycle all day, every day. And the final day, we actually cycled all day, all night, and all the way through the following day
Wow.
as well. we were like 45 hours with no sleep, and 39 hours of that just straight cycling. I still
Right.
don't really know why we did that. I guess I
Yeah.
think it was yeah, yeah. I think back and I'm like, why did we do that? Were we just pushing off? Were we curious, or was it the fact that maybe we were running like low? We only had a
Right.
certain days on our visa, and so we needed to be out of the
Yeah.
country by that time. You know, so we were like, right, we need to keep cycling, no sleep.
So when you're on this adventure and you cross that finish line, how does it compare for that journey for Vietnam and Cambodia? And how does it compare when walking, was it over 350 days to cross the Yangtze River and what's that feeling? Is it euphoric? Is it everything you imagined? And can you just describe that for me?
You mean like the difference between the Vietnam
The
cycle?
difference, yeah.
You know what? I would say that they were both big and exciting in their own right. I would say when I finished that Cambodia Vietnam cycle, it was kind of the trigger point. That's when I kind of realized my niche, realized my passion. And I remember talking to my friend when we're cycling up in the mountains, nothing but shorts and a vest. It's throwing it down with rain, but it's still warm. And I said to him, one day, man, I would love to have a world map on my wall and then just across certain amount of countries, lines where I've done adventures from like camelback across this desert, hiking this section, you know, and I would
Right,
have this map, not filled, but in different continents with different lines. I think that really stuck with me that on completion of the Vietnam cycle, I was already thinking, what can I do next? And so it was,
right,
although it wasn't 352 days like the Yangtze
right,
River that I did, it was only 15 days, but it was still quite a powerful 15
right,
days that would change the course of my direct.
right. So it was quite impactful.
And that's exactly sort of what it is. Yeah, and you kind of never know what's gonna happen, you know, and that's kind of why I traveled because I thought I can plan the travels all I want and I can
Right,
have these exciting ideas. I can go against the normal routine of college, university, or military, you know, what the rest of the students were doing, and go against that and see what happens because something might happen. And everything that I thought of didn't line up with an adventure career. I didn't even know you could get paid for that sort of stuff.
right,
And so it just kind of proved me right that there's a world full of opportunities. And I guess no matter what we do, even for the audience, you just never know which direction or what's going to point you subtly down a different lane, you know, which is
right.
exciting. It's a cool thing about life.
Of course. So, I was hoping we could hop into your first world record of Madagascar and kind of go over and just if you could tell me a little bit more about the journey itself.
Yeah, sure. The first one was Mongolia.
Okay, Mongolia.
Yeah, so I'll start with the Mongolia trip. That was mentally probably my most fearful journey, I would say. You know, picture this. I was living in Thailand. You know, I so after the Vietnam cycle, just to bring the audience up to speed, after that Vietnam cycle, I decided I wanted to pursue more adventures. Some of these were really reckless, dangerous, but fun adventures. I crossed the border illegally from Thailand to Myanmar. I learned how to survive in the jungle with the Burmese hill tribe, which was an amazing
Wow.
experience. I then cycled different parts of Southeast Asia, tried my hand at fruit picking in Australia, where we had to raise funds to continue our travels. We didn't like it, so we ended up hitchhiking North Australia, cycling across southern Australia. And then we went to India. And
Wow.
this is where we were then back in the Himalayas, right north of India on the border of Pakistan. Again, with no permit. So
Right.
pretty illegal again, but it was great fun. We didn't have the funds for all of that.
Yeah.
And then it was now to look at settling down somewhere. And I'd already had this plan that when I leave college, start traveling, I need to invest in myself and find a
Right.
qualification that will enable me to sort of find work abroad so that I don't have to keep coming back home to the UK, working again as a
Right.
lifeguard and fish and chip shop and then
Right.
go out. And so we worked on scuba diving. So for the next 2 years, I was living and working in Thailand as a scuba diving instructor, Muay Thai fighter, and this was all good. It was fun. But 2 years went by and I started to miss those previous
Right.
adventures. Kind of thinking, what can I do next? That's where sort of Dahlia comes into it.
That's awesome. So when you went to this Mongolia journey, I know this one was completely supported by yourself. There's a photo, and I'll put it up for the viewers, of you walking across with a giant trailer. So how much did that weigh?
That trailer on an empty load with nothing in it whatsoever was 40 kilograms.
Wow.
And on a full load, it was 120 kilograms, which I believe is about 260 pounds, or 18 stone. And the purpose of that is it was built using mild steel
Right.
by a friend of a friend in his back garden.
Wow.
And so, like you just said, then I didn't really, I didn't have the funds, didn't have the budget. It was a
Yeah.
very cheap expedition. It came to probably no more than £5,000 um, for a world record, and so
Yeah.
I couldn't go to the factory. I guess to have a carbon fiber sort of solid trailer built, that would already cost 5 grand. And, so
Right.
as a family friend built it in the back garden. And the main priority is that it was strong and sturdy and durable so that it doesn't break during the crossing of Mongolia. Because most hauling journeys do fail down to the cart or the sledge that they're
Right.
pulling back, sort of breaking. So that was a priority.
So when you're pulling, how many kilograms you say it was again when it was full?
120.
So you're pulling this 120 kilogram across Mongolia. What's the terrain like? Is it elevated? Is it soft sand? What's it like?
Yeah, it's a mix. So I had 3 weeks of walking across the Altai Mountains to
Okay.
begin with, and then I had 5 weeks across the Gobi Desert, which is sort of a mix of soft sand and gravel, and
Wow.
then 3 weeks over the Mongolian steppe, which was again grassland, but also a lot of soft sand, but more paved tracks that I came across further out in the east.
Right.
But the first sort of 8 to 9 weeks was just, brutal because the Altai Mountains are big time and the trailer had no brakes for when you're
Oh
going
my
down
god.
the mountains. But then the desert was the toughest, 40
Yeah.
plus Celsius. I was already skinny
Wow.
and beaten up from my time in the Altai Mountains. And, things took a turn for the worst, I guess, when I was in the Gobi Desert.
How much weight did you lose throughout this journey? Because I can't imagine you can be carrying too much food or
Yeah.
nutrition throughout the journey.
Yeah, exactly. I think I lost altogether about 12 to 13 kilograms in
Wow.
that 78-day journey. And the food that I carried came in the ration packs. So I remember carrying about 5.5 weeks worth of ration packs. And then water, I had a big 20-liter container, which is
Mhm.
20 kilograms in the
Right.
trailer. So already, it's a heavy load, and then
So
equipment to survive the cold weather, but
right,
also equipment to survive the hot weather. So it was almost like two different expeditions kind of
right.
merged into one.
Wow. That's amazing. And what was it like, refilling your water? Or like how did you get more water throughout this journey?
I would rely on the locals where I could, but
Right.
wells in the middle of the desert. And so it'd be in the form of a well. So I had these maps, and we had confirmed water sources and unconfirmed water sources sort of laid out. Um, and some were locked, some were dry.
Wow.
And the time where I was really suffering in the Gobi Desert from heat exhaustion, which went on to heat stroke, and therefore I almost lost my life, that was down to an unconfirmed water source.
Uh-huh.
Uh, you know, there was no water. And so then I had to try to make my current amount of water last me to the next point where
Right.
there was confirmed water.
So what's that moment like when you come to the well and you realize it's dry? And what's going through your mind? And how do you like mentally push yourself to get to that next well? Because I feel like that's got to be like the greatest obstacle of it all.
Yeah, that's a scary. It was scary, and I had to like really not panic because of it. And the thing is, I would always try to anticipate or try to carry enough water to get me through 2 wells. And the
Right.
good thing is, one was unconfirmed, but the next one is confirmed. It's a community, so there's people there. However, you're in the desert, it's 40 degrees, it's soft sand, so the trailer now feels like 500 kilograms. The sun's
Right.
beating down. you're already, lost a lot of muscle mass. You're skinnier. You're kind of broken because you've been hiking now 4 to 5 weeks, and you end up going through the water a lot quicker, and
Right,
still you're still low on water. You're still not hydrating enough, as nowhere near as what I should have been, because I had to ration the water, of course. And so when I got to that dry water well and realized I had to push on to the next community and rely on the little bit of water that I had left because I was already going through so much of it, it was a panic and a shock and a
right,
realization. As I continued to walk, I was very quickly slipping into heat stroke, which is usually
wow,
fatal. My organs were drying up. I could feel it. I was delirious, hallucinating. I'd have to hide under my trailer to escape the sun. And
right,
sometimes I could be under my trailer for a good hour because I was just in so much agony. I didn't want to get out into the burning sun and push on, but I knew I had to, because if I
right,
don't, I'm gonna die out here in the Gobi Desert. Um, and that was the scary thing, is realizing that if you don't keep getting up and pushing on, you're gonna die out here in the
right,
desert. And so I couldn't really visualize 4 days to the next community where the
right,
water is. And what I had to do now was kind of break my goals down into 100-meter sections, because I
mhm,
realized I was walking about 1 or 200 meters before I would rest under my tree. I
right,
was I can do 100 meters and then rest for 5 minutes and try to keep it to a maximum of 5 minutes and not an hour. And
right,
if I keep doing that, maybe I can survive. Those 100 meters will add up. And 4 days later, I might make it to that community. And, luckily I did. I was in an awful way. My
right,
urine pretty much black. Took me a good
wow.
8 days to recover. Um, it was a scary prospect, but I pushed on.
So when you get back to normal circumstances after this journey and you're eating so less and you're having so less water, can you go back to just normal? Like when you get back and you're finished your journey, can you have a huge meal or do you slowly have to work yourself to like more normal food conditions? Is it a gradual buildup or how does that work?
Yeah, I would say you try to stuff your face as much as you can, but it doesn't really work because your stomach lining, your belly
Right,
kind of shrunk over that time. And so you can order a meal and think you're gonna demolish it and then, like, get desserts after, but you probably won't even make it through the half the meal, in fact. And so it does take a
right.
while for you then to, but you also put on weight fast if you eat a lot,
Oh,
because your
wow.
body is sort of, panicked because it's just been in starvation mode. And then when you start feeding your body and eating, it actually stores the food more as fats because it thinks that you
Right,
might starve yourself again. So it doesn't burn off the reserves, it stores it. So you actually can
right.
get pretty fat after mention like this.
Well, that's probably why I saw an image of you in the middle of the Gobi Desert working out, and I was so confused. I was like, "You're
Yeah.
already pushing a 120 kilogram load, but you're doing crunches in the middle of the desert."
Yeah, 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 that's it. And I guess I was doing that to try to keep my mindset focused, but also to stay in routine. It's the same with Madagascar in a way. You're in the jungle, it's hot, it's humid. And when I woke up, I would like to get routine, drink some water, pack my tent, have a quick shave sometimes because there's a lot of insects that like to,
Right,
or a lot of fungus that likes to grow within the beard if you leave it long enough. And so it's that sort of mindset it's kind of like a military mindset in a way
right,
of being routine. And sometimes in the desert, it would normally be, it was either in the morning or in the evening where, I would pack up, set up a tent. I would just be eating my ration pack and watching the sunset. I'm happy because it's been a good day. I've got an hour to before I get into the tent, so there's nothing really to do in the desert. So I'll just whack out a few push-ups, a few sit-ups, maybe stretch off a little bit because I've been strapped in that
right,
full harness pulling that trailer. And yeah, I think it helped to keep my mindset focused and not go
right.
insane. Because I think there was one point where I went over 8 days with seeing
Wow.
another person.
So what's it like when you're encountering communities on this trip? Are they helpful? Are they communicative? What's it like, and can you speak
And
to them?
yeah, you do. They're really helpful. I had positive experience. Not everyone does, but I didn't really have one. bad experience. Like there was a time I got my solar panel stolen in the politest way possible. But I wasn't. It wasn't a risk to the expedition. But most of the locals that I came across were
Right.
super helpful, always welcoming me inside their gur or their yurt, feeding me up, giving me water to take away, and sort of wishing me well. I remember
Right.
a guy chasing me down on horseback. He came from a distance away. It's all flat land, so you
Right.
just miles and miles, and sometimes you could see like a white dot in the
Yeah.
distance, like a little white felt tent in the distance, and you think it's close, but that might take you a whole day to walk to,
Right.
because it's just so vast the land. And I remember seeing a guy on horseback, far away, just a cloud of dust. And, once he arrived, it was just to give me takeaway tea.
Wow.
uh, so
Wow.
he traveled that distance to wish me well, give me some water because he knew just how harsh and how difficult the Gobi Desert is. It's rare that they see someone walking,
Right.
uh, especially a Western,
Right.
Uh, and that's what the record was. It was solo, meaning sort of no outside interference, no
Right.
van following, and unsupported, where I'd be carrying everything on my backpack. Whereas the locals, of course, they've traveled back and forth
Right.
Mongolia thousands of years, a long time before I ever came along. But it suggested that they would always travel as a unit with a
Right.
family, or they would have camels to help travel with them. So the record was that solo and unsupported, which was the important on this expedition.
Wow. That's amazing. So when talking about Madagascar and shifting our focus to your second of 3 world records, it's a lot of them.
Yeah.
So was that one unsupported as well, or was that solo? Can you tell us a little bit about that one?
Yeah, so that expedition was the first person to walk the entire length of Madagascar. So
Wow.
this one didn't need to be solo or
Mhm.
unsupported.
Right.
I just had to complete the journey,
Mhm.
but also summiting 8 highest mountains along the way.
Wow.
So Madagascar's got this mountain range that kind of lies pretty much the entire length, and
Right.
the 8 highest peaks sort of ridge along the entire length of the island. And I wanted to take on that route because that was the most wild section, the most extreme, where I'd be relying solely on, a lot of survival. I'd be away from the coast, where there's
Right.
a coast, there's beaches and there's people, and so you're relatively safe. Whereas in the jungle, it's a wild place,
Right.
temperamental. You're in the jungle, so there's less people. You'd have people hunting and gathering.
Right.
That was, 1,600 miles,
Wow.
155 days it took to complete. So it was only 100 miles longer than my Mongolia journey,
Right.
but it took almost double the duration to complete because mainly the north, you'd be sometimes hiking for 12 to 14 hours and you'd be lucky to cover 3, 4 kilometers in that
Wow.
amount of time because the sheer density of the jungle, as you're there with your machete hacking through.
Yeah.
Sometimes it just slows you down.
Wow. So, like, going through this jungle and just slashing away at it trees, and I think I've seen a photo of you going through and doing that, so that's
Mm.
absolutely amazing. So, I did wanna ask you particularly about, Gertrude and the story behind it
Yeah.
because I thought this was the most fascinating, interesting part. So, if you could
Yeah,
tell us a
it's
little bit about that mountain in particular and the story of
yeah, sure.
Gertrude.
Yeah, highest mountain in Madagascar, it's called Maramakocho, and in order to summit that particular peak, it's traditional, the locals say it's a culture whereby you must take yourself a white cockerel, um, a living white cockerel to the peak of the mountain. Therefore, the Malagasy people really believe in witches and bad
Right.
spirits. And so by taking a white cockerel, they say that bad spirits and witches are scared of white chickens and that will deter them. So it'll allow you to get to the peak safely. And then
Right.
you've got to do a bit of a prayer on top, a bit of a blessing. You've got to mix honey with whiskey, pour it on top of the rock at
Okay.
the peak of the mountain. And then you've got to free that little chicken that you've taken up to that mountain. So that's its freedom day.
Okay.
But it's kind of a sacrifice because you're not
Right.
surviving that mountain during the cyclone
Yeah.
season. And so I am all about protecting, not protecting, looking after um, the sort of culture, following the
Right.
tradition, as I get respect in their way, I guess. And so I agreed. I said, yeah, that's fine. I did know of it before I started this journey. I was given a
Right.
heads up that they may take up a white cock. So it didn't come as a shock. So I said, yes, we found myself a white cockerel that I chose to name Gertrude.
It's
And Gertrude joined me. He was the fifth member. And not the locals didn't really understand, but we weren't just trekking the highest mountain
right.
in Madagascar, but from that community, that would be the last community that we come across before we attempt to summit three of the highest mountains in the north. And
Right.
so Gertrude therefore had to come with us on these three other mountain peaks.
Right.
And so it wasn't like a few days hike. He was with us for 2.5 weeks. And I had to
Wow.
look after him. I had to feed him, give him water, protect him. Um, and he became pretty much fully domesticated over that time. He was like a little pet dog. We wouldn't need to tie him off. He wouldn't run off. He would follow
Right.
us on top of my tent. And then, 2.5 weeks later, we get to the top of that
Right.
mountain and we set free. Um,
Right.
yeah,
Were you
very,
hoping he'd follow you back down, or was
yeah, kind of was, yeah, because it was raining, it was cyclone season. I remember the last sort of hour of trekking, I had him in my hands at this point, and I was just bending over so that he could pluck out worms from the grass, from the soil,
right.
feed him up. And then as soon as we dropped him off at the top, he kind of hid under a rock because it was
Right.
raining. Um, and then yeah, we kind of left. I wanted to take him back down, but the locals believe if you
Right.
take him back down, you'll be introducing the witches and spirits to that next community that you come
Right.
across, or you'll be bringing them off the mountain. And so they would have genuinely been really angry at me
Right.
because they truly believe in that stuff. So I was
Could
like,
you
yeah, sorry.
imagine if you went down there with the chicken? Like, I couldn't let him go. They would have freaked
Yeah,
out.
when my head off.
Uh, so at the start of the journey with Gertrude, did you have him strapped in, and was he like constantly pecking at you, or did you like put him in your bag and zip it up?
Yeah, I've got a zipper on top of the rucksack. And so I would put him in the little pouch up there, but I wouldn't zip it over his head. I would keep like a little hole open so
Right.
that he would like be poked out, chirping away. And it was funny. I realized when it was sunny, he was all right. Actually, when it was rainy, it was all right because he would tuck in the rucksack and sort of shelter away from the rain. But when it was sunny, he would
Right.
be out singing and chirping. That sounds all great and wonderful, but when you're hacking through a jungle for
Yeah.
14 hours
Last
and
thing you
you're
want
in
to hear.
pain, you've got spider bites, you're bleeding because of the leeches, you're hungry, and you're not drinking enough water, and then you've got this cockerel just chirping away. You just pray for the bit of rain.
Yeah, I don't know what kind of animals are in Madagascar jungles, but were you scared of animals seeing Gertrude on your back and thinking might be a tasty snack or something to attack?
Um, not really. It was funny. The only issue we got into is him fighting other chickens. We did come across like another two communities actually before we reached the summit of the biggest mountain, and they actually do cockerel fighting, and they really wanted my Gertrude to fight their cockerel.
Oh,
And
lord.
so yeah, and I was kind of like, okay, this is their way. Let's do it. And he won. He beat
There we
two.
go.
Yeah, it's like yes, go Gertrude.
That's Gertrude.
Um,
Got him a little Muay
but
Thai?
yeah, little Gertrude knew Muay Thai, but there was no sort of there's certain venomous insects. You've got your spiders, scorpions as well.
Wow.
But there's no venomous snakes. You've got your wild lemur, and so I kind of thought as long as he's around us, he should be all right. Uh, that at nighttime he would jump on top of my tent and sleep up there anyway.
Right.
But yeah, no, it was all right. He was
Right.
safe.
So in terms of animals from Madagascar and Mongolia, it wasn't too bad, but the Yangtze in China, walking the length of that was probably quite dangerous with the animals there. So what was that like?
Yeah, that was intense. With the Mongolia, there were wolves in the Altai Mountains, but
Wow.
I never seen them up, and they didn't really get close. But in China, walking the Yangtze, it was very different. Yeah, it was. Just picture we're at the source of the Yangtze River, It's over 5,100 meters in altitude, which is already similar height to Mount Everest base camp.
Wow.
The winter season was starting to close in. Therefore, it was the worst time to start, but we were delayed by 2.5 months, so we had no choice.
Wow.
So we started in effectively hunting season, where the bears and the wolves would be actively looking, well, especially the bears, they would be looking for calories before they go into torpor,
Wow.
um, like their version of hibernation.
Right.
And I kind of went out there with this mindset of, leave the bears alone and the bears will leave you alone.
Right.
But all of the locals were educating me and saying,
Right.
yeah, that's not the case. And then they
Wow.
started to share stories and photos and videos. And, I was even seeing on the news, like bears going into communities, entering huts and like killing families. And I was like, oh my God, and I'm in a tent. I'm in a damn tent and these bears are breaking down steel doors to get
Wow.
food inside the inn.
So
So it was real, go on.
right. Yeah. So did you have anything to protect yourself with? Any weaponry? Anything you're allowed to carry?
No, no, it's illegal as a foreigner to carry any sort of weaponry.
Wow.
Um, well, illegal for anyone really. And so, I was gifted a knife by a local, but I thought, that's not going to do
That's not
anything
gonna
to
do much against a bear or even a wolf for that matter of fact.
the wall. And I was given an air horn and a whistle.
Right.
And one of the locals did say, make sure that the bear is aware of your presence. So maybe if
Right.
you're walking and it's morning or nighttime, you blow your whistle. Because if the bear hears you, it might, be
Right.
scared and run off. Because he said most attacks happen is where you stumble upon a bear by
Right.
surprise and it's shocked and it gets scared and attacks out of fear. But then other locals were saying, nah, if it's hungry, it's not gonna care about your damn whistle. It's gonna eat you. I was
There's
just
not
like,
much you
"Oh,
can do about the angry bear.
yeah."
Not anything
And so
alerting
the
you. I'm
bears
over here.
exactly, yeah, so they were an issue, the bears were, but also the wolves were quite,
Wow.
worrying. Me and my videographer that joined me from Texas for 4 days, we were followed by a pack of wolves for 2 of those
Wow.
4 days, So it wasn't a very pleasant time for him. But we could hear these wolves howling. I
Right.
remember only a day before we'd talked to some Tibetan locals and they were trying to advise us against something, but we weren't quite sure with what they were
Uh-huh.
saying. But we did film it regardless.
Right.
So we didn't know what to say. We kind of waved at them goodbye. It must have been about 4 or 5 months later. My editing team in Beijing, once they had hold of that footage, one of the girls within called me and said, like, you had no idea what that guy was saying that time, but he was actually saying that only yesterday, right down that valley where you're going, a local was killed by a pack of wolves. Do not go down there.
Wow.
But we didn't know that, so we were like,
Yeah.
well, but bye. And for the next 2 days, we were actually followed by a pack of wolves. Whether it was the same pack or not, I'm not
Right.
too sure. But it kind of makes sense
Wow.
that it could have been.
So how do you know when you're being followed, or did you know at that time? And if so, is it by the howling noises, or what's the indication?
Yeah, well, we didn't know straight away. We
Right.
realized when they started howling at first, we were actually in awe. It was pretty awe-inspiring,
Right.
like, wow, I'd never heard wolves
Right.
howling out in the wild before. So I remember thinking, whoa. But then, nighttime approached. And then if we heard the wolves howling, it was a little bit creepy. Then it was a bit like,
Right.
that's not the best, but we're tired. We slept fine that night. And then the next day, we're still walking and we hear howling again. And we're kind of like, well, these aren't leaving us.
Right.
Wolves normally cover much greater distance than humans. And it always felt like the sound of the howls with the same proximity from us for 2 whole days.
Wow.
So we kind of gathered that although we couldn't really see them because it was kind of like they were over that hill that we were on, they
Right.
could definitely see us. And I think they were watching. I think maybe had it have been me, they might have been braver and like come closer. But because
Right.
there was 2 of us and we weren't limping, there was no signs of weakness. I think eventually they just gave up and saw us as too much of a big risk.
Right.
Where maybe the local that they killed, it could have been an older
Right.
lady, I mean, a vulnerable lady or an older vulnerable guy on his own out in the wild, and then they probably took advantage, uh, but it would have been
Right.
dangerous for them because I don't think they would have succeeded simply because they were smaller. They weren't like the big
Right.
wolves, the grey in Mongolia. They're a lot
Oh,
bigger and a lot threatening. But the wolves in China are a little bit more, they're smaller. I was
right.
more scared of the Tibetan mastiffs than I was
The Tibetan what? Sorry?
Tibetan mastiffs. They're
Mastiff.
kind of semi-wild guard dogs that
Right.
protect the local and the locals' livestock from snow leopards, wolves, and even bears. And these
Right.
dogs look like bears themselves.
Okay.
They are covered in lots of black fur. I did have to fight two of them off on the
Really?
easy. Well, yeah, they two just came running right at me. I had time to quickly pick up a few bricks, and then I was just launching the bricks at the dogs.
Right.
Uh, they just kept coming, and then came so close that I could no longer bend down to pick up any rocks. That I just had to pretend I've got rocks, and they
Right.
would flint. One time I had to literally roundhouse kick the dog in the head. Um,
Wow.
it was to sure that they behind me because then I'll be even more in trouble. And so yeah, it was exhausting. And better masters are just
Right.
they're they can take down wolves.
Right. So when you're setting up your camp and you're having your trash, how do you know that these bears or wolves aren't going to be, attracted to the food or even I know you try to minimize leftovers, but anything that you let down.
Yeah, I would try not to eat where I would camp. If I
Okay.
kind of knew that I was camping in the next hour or two, I tried to eat now and then in an hour or two set up camp. And so
Right.
I'd keep that away. That was only until about 4 months after trekking, once I definitely knew I was out of Bear territory. Um, I was fine then. I could just do whatever I wanted. But
Right.
initially, yeah, I was kind of, a bit careful with food and with what I was
Right.
eating and where. And if there was any local communities, because this one, it wasn't solo or unsupported. It wasn't anything like that. It was just a first, so I just had to get from start to finish and it'd be a first, no fastest or
Right.
via through or with no help. It was,
Right.
it was a straight up mission. Um, and so, yeah, I could rely on the locals
Right.
as well. That was amazing. I could always just go inside these huts or these white
Right.
felt and there was always something so warming about that, especially when
Right.
you're walking all day in the mountains in Bear County and you kind
Right.
of wonder where you're going to sleep that night. You just see bare footprints
Right.
fresh morning, and then a local welcomes you in. You're just like, oh, yes, I'm safe.
Right. And I know you said that a lot of the time throughout the journey you might be alone. So how is that dealing with like being alone and what like motivates you or how do you keep yourself busy while like I know you're busy chopping and walking through the mountain, but how do you keep yourself entertained?
No, yeah, you're right. You get a lot of long, boring days, especially, well, in Madagascar, I don't think I did. I think
Right.
every day Madagascar offered a challenge. I honestly don't think there was a day where I was just like, "Oh, that was a nice day's hike." There was always something, always challenges. Mongolia was a little bit more free, whereas the longer I went with the Mongolia trek, the easier it became on my mindset, I would say, other than the Gobi Desert Scare where I almost
Right.
died. And then with the Yangtze, that was hard because say if I had already done 6, 7 months and I've still got what 4, 5, 6 months
Right.
left. Now I'm in the east, not the west, so I've got more tarmac, and so there's no real threats or challenges, and I'm
Right.
just having to put the miles in on a tarmac road. That, for my mindset, wasn't good because that's not why I do these trips.
Right.
I do these trips for the survival, for the challenges, to go
Right.
places no one's been before when I was in the east of China following these roads. And I was just like, oh God, nothing is difficult about this other than
Right.
alone and that
Right.
loneliness and putting in the paces. pain on my feet and no toenails dropping off, blisters, and
Right.
it's yeah, it was painful and boring. But I guess I break it down day by day. I think one epic achievement it will be if I complete this, and
Right.
the opportunities that will open once I cross that finish line,
Right.
and kind of just not letting people down. I'm a man of my word. I say I'm going to do something, and I want to get it done. I want to finish
Wow.
it. Um, and so I just sort of ignore those sort of thoughts and feelings of those solitude moments where I am so lonely,
Right.
uh, up in my own head, thinking all sorts of deep thoughts. I kind of just like take it day by day.
Right. And I guess that's a healthy mindset when going through it. And in terms of, like, the support you got from the locals, was it sometimes just, like, the social aspect of having someone to speak to? Were you able to speak the language with them, and how did that work?
Yeah, I did spend a bit of time trying to learn Mandarin before I start
Right,
this expedition. And it's very difficult, especially because the dialects just
of course.
continue to change. I got well over 100 dialects across China. And so sometimes they would understand, sometimes they wouldn't. But regardless if they understand or not, it's just seeing another human
Right,
um, who's smiling, who's friendly, who's open to inviting you inside, a warm cup of tea, give you some food to take away. It can be 10-minute interaction, or it could be like an overnight stay, their their pad. And either way, it's just always so warm and welcome. I always say that the locals can either make or break a journey.
right,
And so far, touch wood, the local just made it even more memorable because of lots of the interactions that I had from start to finish.
right. And I know you've got into the Great Wall just recently, but when you think about these journeys and you think about what you've done, is there a feeling of proudness, or do you have a feeling of, I want to get back into it? I want to jump into my next adventure. And do we get any teasers of what's coming next?
Yeah, both, I would say, Jay. I would say when I come back, I'm kind of like, oh, that was epic. It's annoying as well because when I'm out on the expedition, I look forward to coming home. And then when I come home, eventually after a month or two, I'm
Right,
ready to start planning so that I can go back out.
of course.
No, it's funny how that works, but I wouldn't say I would definitely say I'm still in the moment. I'm still living in the
Right,
moment, enjoying it because I know that the clock is ticking and it's
right,
only a matter of time before I'm back in the wilderness, missing the comfort of home again, you
right,
know? I think it's one of those. But yeah, this time round, I would say I am ready to start working on the next trip. I would
right,
say, I am still getting started. Um, Big sort of career ahead with lots of plans, and it's only just starting to grow now, really.
right,
Um, it was great after the Yangtze. It was big sort of global news. It was Nat Geo Yangtze show. It was the invitation onto the Joe Rogan podcast. And,
right,
COVID kind of then, as it did with all of us, it kind of hit hard, didn't it? And
right. It's a,
made everyone settle down for a couple of years.
yeah.
But now, thankfully, after this Great Wall, I would say the Great Wall is probably the biggest step of my adventuring career so far.
Wow.
Legitimate sort of two projects that I was filming for 4.5 months straight. 20 members. I had directors, executive producers,
Right,
full on film crew, which was I've never had that before, All of the previous trips were sort of GoPro in hand and a hell of a lot of self-filming my journey in the hope that it gets picked up by a channel in the future. Whereas this one was already commissioned, it's already done deal. Um, and so now I think with this one, when it goes out, which will probably be within the next 4 months,
right,
because it got 600 hours of footage. So
wow,
editing team had a lot of work on their hands. And so I reckon it'll take them a good 3 to 4 months at least to get these 6 episodes in place. And we want to launch that. And with that launch, we then want to tackle the next adventure and come up with a plan. But it's going to be more for TV rather than a record.
right.
But if we can somehow convert
Get on
both,
those.
yeah, then that would be great because I have still got a good few world first records in mind. It just comes down to if it's financially beneficial,
Right.
you know?
That seems like a proper next step. We love
Mm.
seeing the work you're doing, and we love being in tune so we can watch stuff you do.
Mhm.
Outside of the adventures, do you have any hobbies? Do you watch football, rugby, any sports, music?
Uh, I don't really watch a lot of sports,
Right.
but I would say when I get back home, I do an awful lot of training. I think
Okay.
when I go back to London, I like the thought of getting back into Muay Thai,
Right.
um, mountain biking.
Mhm.
But over the past sort of year, I've been focusing a lot on air-based activities and extreme sports. And so I do a lot of skydiving. I want to sort
Wow.
of progress the skydiving. I would like to do a journey in the future whereby I combine all three, sort of
Right.
land, air, and sea. You know, I've got my sea-based qualifications, I've got my
Right.
land-based survival, and now I'm, well on my way to ticking off a lot of air-based adrenaline
Right.
fueled activities, which then it would be pretty cool to tie in a land, air, and sea mission, point A to point B, over, inhospitable terrains, very wild locations would be pretty cool, I think, just to stray away from the walking and the hiking because I'd like to reconnect with my roots. And that's what this Great Wall show was all about as well. It was about
Right.
the history and the people along the way, but it wasn't via walking. I didn't walk the Great Wall of China. I was doing walking, cycling, mountain biking. I even scuba dived it. We
Right.
went to Shaolin Temple to learn about the martial arts and
Wow.
mindset there. We flew by a helicopter. It was camelback. It was dune buggies. And so it was sort of really, yeah, it was cool. It was kind of like a whole David Attenborough meet
Right.
Jason Bourne in the styles that
Right.
we were filming, very scenic, very landscape, very beautiful, but then also very action packed and
Right.
adventurous.
Full on cultural immersion.
Yeah. Yeah. It was good fun. It was, yeah. And so this will open up, even more doors and get me outside of that sort of just typical hiking and surviving.
Right. Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much, guys, for joining us on this podcast. And thank you so much for Ash for taking time out of his busy, busy schedule. I know tomorrow you're heading back out somewhere and you're just always on the move. So thank you for taking your time to speak with us. And yeah, it was a pleasure speaking with you too, Ash.
Yeah, no, appreciate that, Jake. Thanks for calling. We said we were going to make this happen, and we did. So
Right.
let's keep in touch, and after the next adventure, we'll do it again.
Sounds good. Thank you.